Hey, welcome back. Sydney Brown here. We are getting into the juicy bits now. We're all the way through talking about how to set it up, starting to write it, and then now we're getting into the editing. So chapter 8, guys, is going to be talking about editing and revising your memoir, the importance of self-editing, techniques for revising content and structure, and then proofreading and polishing your work. And then finally, we're going to end chapter 8 with top 10 editing tips for memoir writers. Now, you are here watching the Memoir Mastery course. It is a step-by-step guide for writing your life story. And I am Sydney Brown, and I want you to do me a favor. Please go ahead and subscribe so that you don't lose your place. Obviously, the goal is to watch the whole course in as close to one sitting as possible, but there is a lot of content that I'm giving you here. So I know you're probably going to have to leave and come back. Go ahead and like and subscribe so that you are able to come right back to where you left off. Do me a favor also, if you will, and go ahead and put a comment below that says you subscribed. I get into the comments and I do my best to respond to everybody as much as possible. And I appreciate your support in building up our channel, helping keep content free. All right, guys, let's get right into it. We're going to start by talking about the importance of self-editing. You know, if you're wondering why self-editing is vital when writing your personal memoir, don't worry. We've got you covered with these top 10 reasons. Now, number 1 is pretty obvious, catching mistakes. You know, the first reason to self-edit is to get back through, to read through your content, and it allows you to catch mistakes before they're published, before they're printed and shared with whoever you're choosing to share yours with. You know, whether it's a typo, a grammatical error, or a factual mistake, you really need to go through your work at least 2 or 3 times. I recommend 6 or 7 usually, and it helps you catch those things that you may have missed otherwise and correct it. Number 2, improving clarity. Now, by reading your work critically, because at first you're writing it emotionally, and then you're going back through it logically, but now we're going to self-edit critically. By doing that, you identify areas where your writing might be confusing, it may be unclear. You know what it means because you were there. But would someone else who didn't know the story understand? So you have to start thinking as an outsider or as the reader and try to make sure that it's clear enough and you go deep enough that an outsider, your reader, would totally understand what you're talking about. Make any changes to improve that if it's not clear. Number 3, refining your voice. Now remember, we've talked about voice, but by reading your work out loud, which is vital, very, 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 it's just so important to hear, even if it's not your voice, because I will often go into a Word doc and I will have it read aloud to me, and then I'll read the words as I'm hearing it, because that helps you so much in catching things that you become, you know, blind to. But by doing that, you're able to critically evaluate your word choices, your phrasing, and make sure that it sounds like you. You know, you're not, and then she did this, and what is this, you know, and just make sure that it's the way you talk, because that's what really matters, that it's your voice. Number 4, ensuring consistency. Now, there's a lot of things that you need to be consistent about, your point of view, your past or present tense, all of these things. But what I'm really talking about right now is just the technical things of, you know, did you use this person's name the same way all the way through? I've read books where someone will be married to Beau, B-O, and then later they're married to Beau, B-E-A-U. And I'm like, I guess he changed his name, you know, and it's just one of those things that the editing was missed. It read probably the same way. It sounded the same, but they weren't looking at it at the same time. So you have to really make sure that everything's consistent, that your plots, your storylines, that everything is as it should be, because now is the time to make all those changes. Your timelines, there's so many things that really are involved in this. So when you're done with your draft, the editing phase is both almost as emotional as the drafting phase, because at that point you have to step back out of your emotions and just edit critically, you know, be very critical, very outsider looking in. But you want to make sure that your memoir is fully coherent and easy to follow, because you don't want to put your reader to work when they're trying to read your story and take that journey with you. Number 5, cutting unnecessary content. Now, this is one of those things that, you know, people feel a lot of the times like the thicker their book is, the better it is. You know, if you have great writing and great content and your words are packed, then you can have an amazing short story that your readers will love even more than a story that's 3 or 4 times as long, but has all of these fluffy words, things that don't add to the story. So cut unnecessary content. Don't be tricked that more words is better. It just isn't. It really isn't. Now, if it helps you get deeper into the emotions, absolutely go deep and use those words, but make your words count. Make sure each word in each sentence and each paragraph, each scene, each chapter, everything is there for a reason. If it doesn't have a reason, then evaluate it and cut it out and paste it somewhere else for later. Maybe it still belongs in your story, but just not right there. So just be very critical as you cut out unnecessary content. All right, number 6, streamlining your writing. Now, by that, I'm saying, you know, tighten up your sentences, remove unnecessary words. It's kind of what we just talked about. Make sure that your writing is as concise and impactful as possible, because truly, you don't want to waste your readers' time with a bunch of words that don't help them, right? So make sure that you streamline your content. Make sure that everything has a meaning. Number 7, enhancing readability. Now, by that, we're talking about, you know, breaking up the long paragraphs using smaller paragraphs. The world has a shorter attention span than it probably ever has. And right now, we like to read easy. So take those paragraphs that are this long and break them in half, whatever it is. You know, just each time you have something that could be a new topic, break it. Turn it into a smaller paragraph. You'll notice in most of my books, I am a firm believer in the easy reads. So you make your paragraphs smaller. You incorporate white space. You use subheadings. You use bullets, different things like that. Now, if in a memoir, you may not want to use bullets as much, but if it's a nonfiction of other form, bullets are a great way to make something much easier to read. Just make sure that your reader doesn't have to work so hard to enjoy your journey. Number 8, improving pacing. Now, by evaluating the flow of your story, making changes to the order of events, things like that can ensure that your memoir is more engaging and well paced. And by that, I mean, if it's true, if it happened, like I was 7 and then I was 8 and then I was 9, you don't want to tell a story about when I was 7 and then I was 9 and then I was 8. You don't want to turn things out of order that should be in order. But if it's not something that's specifically in a chronological order, then you can change the way your reader enjoys the story, by structuring, throw some humor in here, do some serious moments here, talk a little deep right here because right now your reader is on the edge. Talk yourself through making sure that the structure is going in the right direction. Number 9, polishing your editing or your writing. So self-editing is really important. When you do the polishing, that's basically saying, okay, I've done all the steps of editing. I believe this is really great. Let me go through it one more time though, because that's when, you're taking it from good to great or from great to amazing. It's polishing it. You could go without polishing, but I wouldn't. This is your story. So this is what's going to be your legacy. Go ahead and give it one more round through and polish it. Make sure that it is a high standard, that you're evaluating each sentence and, your phrases, and just make it shine. Okay, and then finally, number 10, making it the best it can be. And then I've got finally, self-editing is vital because it allows you to make your memoir the best it can be. By taking the time to carefully edit and revise your work, it's not always easy, but it is worth it. You can ensure that your memoir is the best it can be before you share it with the world. It's self-editing is vital part of the writing process, especially when it comes to personal memoirs, because you may not send it to a professional editor. So that's completely up to you, and it depends on what level of expertise you have in editing. If you're not comfortable editing on your own, you still do your own self-editing to your extent that you can, but then you would hire someone else to go through it again. It's just very, very important. It leaves you can tell when a book was or was not really well edited. So let yours be one of the ones that is edited. Do the best you can, and don't worry about handing it off to someone else to do a professional editing after you. You can do that. Absolutely. There are a lot of great editors out there. Just make sure that you've done your part as far as the structure, the story, the timelines, all of that stuff that is in your control, that nobody else can help you with that part. So get your part done and then hand it off if you need to. Otherwise, a lot of people will go through this and maybe use a tool like, Microsoft Word has a great editor now, and Grammarly, I use that. So if you can use an editing tool, that will actually help you a lot as well. All right, guys, let's move on. All right, now we're going to move into techniques for revising the content and the structure. You may be wondering about revisions. Now, it can be a bit intimidating for sure, but don't worry, we've got you covered with the top 10 techniques for revising. Number 1, take a break. After you have completed your manuscript, your first draft, then you want to just take some time, 1 day, 2 days, a week. Just put the thing completely out of your mind and do whatever you would be doing, catch up with your other things, whatever. But then come back in a few days and you should have had some time to have a mental reset, and you'll be able to, have fresh eyes and a new perspective. And that really helps. Number 2, evaluate your structure. The next technique is to look at the order of the events in your story, the pacing. Consider rearranging, like we talked about, or cutting content out to improve the flow of your memoir. Number 3, cut unnecessary content. Now, by cutting unnecessary content, it may be something that's important to you, and if it is, you leave it. If it doesn't help the story or explain things or give any answers, then you really might want to cut and paste it somewhere else, because it doesn't mean it doesn't have value. It just may not belong in that story. So just give it a good, going over and see if there's anything that needs to be cut out. Number 4, refine your voice. As you go through, you start typing, or maybe you're even handwriting, but you need to be, typing this out, and kind of, you may get into the weeds emotionally, and you may, yeah, then that happened, and then that happened, and then this, that, and you might just kind of get into this, the zone, for lack of a better word. And then you read it and you're like, this doesn't even sound like me. So if you see that, and it will happen a lot of the time, if you see that it doesn't sound like you, that's okay. That's what this is for. That's exactly the right time to go back through and refine your voice. Break it into smaller paragraphs, and put dialogue in. Do whatever you need to do to make it sound like you. Number 5, check for consistency. Consistency, guys, is something that you may think your reader is not looking at, and they may not be reading it critically with the intent to find loopholes or where you've erred. But when a reader is on the outside looking in and they're totally getting engrossed in your story, the least little thing might totally derail their focus and their attention, because they might be, like maybe he was in that side of the living room, and then the next time you talk to him, he's in an office, and you're like, wait a minute, how did he get there? And you have to make sure that there's consistency, getting from A to Z. Use the asterisks and the scene dividers or chapter dividers, things like that. If they literally are moving somewhere else, or if time has changed, just make sure that it's consistent and your reader can keep up with you. Number 6, enhance descriptions. This is a really great time to, maybe you talked about, let's see, the first time you ever put on leg warmers. Man, I don't even know where that came from. But maybe you just said, I got a pair of leg warmers for Christmas. They were my favorite. And maybe that's all you've got in there. But maybe, maybe it's something that you can really go deeper on and talk about those leg warmers, because if they were your favorite, if it gives something to your character, and it tells more about your personality, maybe they were those rainbow ones, or whatever, maybe they were like just neon orange, and maybe you had some toed socks also and you wore them together. Whatever the story is, go deep on some of those things, because you miss a lot of opportunities to really let your reader get to know you better. And things that you think nobody's interested in, that's what makes you unique. That's what makes you you. And they are interested. So don't tell them about a mole on your shoulder unless it's like really, really unique. They're not interested in the mole, but they're interested in what drives you emotionally. And if something really made you happy, maybe at a darker time in your life and those leg warmers made you feel like all the rest of the kids and you didn't feel like an outcast, whatever it is, share that. So use these opportunities to enhance your descriptions. Number 7, incorporate feedback. Now, this is super important. After you've completed your own editing, you want to have a friend or two to read along with you to pick out areas that might be confusing. It's called beta readers, and basically what they do is they'll read it and they haven't followed it all the way through all of your edits. They didn't see it before, so they don't know how it's already improved or been, evolved, but they get it in what you think is the done version. And they'll be like, okay, so is this saying that this is this, or is this saying this? And you'll be like, ooh, if they've got a question, then other people probably will have that same question. And so you need to look at anything that they alert you to and see if that's something that you need to clarify, either go a little deeper, add a little more detail, or maybe what confused them is, why is this even here if it doesn't have anything to do with the story? So it may need to be cut and pasted somewhere else, so really important to have those people you trust who actually will read it and give quality constructive feedback. Number 8, tighten up your writing. Now, we've talked about this a little bit. Tighten up your writing by removing unnecessary words or phrases. There's, and it happens a lot, but there are sometimes I'll read a draft and someone might say, I felt like, or I couldn't help but think. When they say that, those are unnecessary words. All you have to do is say, I thought, or even better, use a descriptive in an action to show that they thought, instead of them telling you that they thought. So, or you telling them that they thought. But by doing that, you're able to cut out the words. And honestly, if you repeat phrases over and over again, it actually, kind of like nails on a chalkboard. It actually annoys some readers. So they will be like, I can't even finish it because they just keep saying these one phrases over and over and over again. So be real careful about that. Tighten up your writing and remove anything that's repetitive or unnecessary. Number 9, use active voice. The reason you want to use active instead of passive is it's more engaging. If someone said, I'm at a dance, you're at a nightclub or something, and I'm doing this and dancing, and there was a limbo contest. So would you say there was a limbo contest? You can kind of visualize someone, trying to do the limbo, or I'm in round 3 of the limbo contest, and whatever it is, just find a way to try to make your voice active instead of passive. And number 10, very important, read aloud. And I've said this before, I literally, I use it in Microsoft Word most often, but I will, there's other apps that you can copy and paste and it'll read something to you. I use this to edit almost everything because it is so important. You will not see you'll see some of them, but you won't see most of the things that you've oopsed as you go through. So it's really, really important that you either read it aloud, and even when you read it aloud yourself, you'll automatically sometimes say what your mind is thinking and you'll miss it anyway. So that's why I really like to use something where it reads it to me as I follow along and in the lines, and make the changes as I hear someone else's voice saying something that I'm like, ooh, that's not it. That's not what I meant to say. Because sometimes autocorrect will be your biggest enemy instead of your ally. So just make sure that you read aloud, and definitely look at it's on the review tab of Word review, and then I think it just says read aloud. But you will love that. Revising, guys, is super important, super, super, super important. When you write, you have emotions, and you should. When you edit and revise, you put the emotions on the back burner for a moment, and you get critical and really fix it up and know where your reader is going to take their journey with you. All right, let's keep moving. All right, so we're going to keep on moving. It's time now to start talking about proofreading and polishing your work. So if you're ready, let's jump right into the top 10 methods of doing just that, proofreading and polishing your work. Number 1, print it out. Now, the first method is to print out your memoir, and I'll be honest, I am not a fan of killing trees by printing unnecessarily, but I will tell you that many people find it helpful to go ahead and print out their work so they can actually see it on paper, put a pencil on it, and put question marks, whatever it is that they want to do. A lot of people still have a they're better able to visualize and understand and communicate with themselves when they have a physical paper that they can mark up. So if you're one of those people, absolutely you should go ahead and print it out. Of course, just environmentally friendly. Don't print a new manuscript every day, every week, whatever. Use pencil and erase if you can. Just do what you need to do to get it done and get it done well. Try to save a tree if you can, but it does help. It does. So make sure that you at least consider going ahead and printing it out the one time. Number 2, read it aloud. And we've talked about this. It's so important for you to hear as you see. And so when you read something aloud, it can help you catch the errors, and it also makes sure that your flow and your voice and all of these other aspects are also cared for. Number 3, use a spell checker or a proofreader. Now, by this, I'm talking about like Microsoft Word will have the assistant, I think it's called. And then there's another thing that I use a lot is called Grammarly. I use the Pro version. These are so helpful. I believe even Google Drive will probably have the editor or the assistant as well. So almost any word processing software should have it. Some are better than others. And I'll be honest with you, I like to use Microsoft Word because I have it read it aloud to me as I follow along, which is an amazing way of catching things that your eyes and your mind won't necessarily pick up. But I also use Grammarly Pro. So I use both. And I recommend using a couple different tools because sometimes they'll not pick up everything, or they may even be in conflict with each other. So if one is saying there should be a comma there and one is saying there shouldn't be, then you can go to the internet and search like, Purdue OWL or some other, just the internet as a whole, and find out, should there be a comma here or not? And it's so much worth the effort that it takes. I really recommend. They will save you a lot of time over doing it without. Number 4, check for grammar errors. Now, again, this is kind of duplicated in number 3, because those tools will help you do this as well. If you have it set to that in your settings. Now, grammar errors are not necessarily going to be wrong in a spell checker though. So you have to make sure is if your settings are set to the red lines and the blue lines and the green lines, all of the little squiggly lines when it tells you something's wrong. Some of them are for grammar, some of them are for spelling, some of them are for word use. So make sure that you learn and understand what your tools are telling you, and that way you're better able to check for things like the spelling and the grammar. It's very important. You can find them on the internet as well. A lot of options are free out there nowadays, so don't hesitate. Make sure you're going through that extra effort. Number 5, use a beta reader. Beta readers have been known to save books, because sometimes a writer, because they're so in their own story, they believe they've told the perfect story, but then a beta reader has gone through and said, well, wait a minute, I'm confused about this. Were you 16 here, or was this later? Because you're talking about it back here where you're 30 something, but I think that you're talking about when you were 16, and that one error when the writer had not been clear enough, it was very important, and they were able to revise that paragraph, and it just saved the whole story. Because once a reader gets confused, they almost always will give up on you. Now, some are just so stubborn that they're gonna get through it, and then they're gonna get mad though that you confused them. So do your best, use a beta reader when you can. Number 6, take a break. And I think I said this before. After you've done your manuscript, your brain is just like numb. So it's really important that whether it's a few hours, but probably a few days, just go away from it. Take a break, do other things, let your mind relax, go on other areas, and then come back refreshed, and then you'll be able to see things more clearly where there are errors. Number 7, read in reverse. Now, reading in a memoir backwards from the ending to the beginning is a way that you can actually catch the grammatical errors, the typos and things like that. When you read it forward, you know the story and you're following it, and you accidentally, you don't realize you're doing it, but you're skimming. So when you read sentence by sentence from the back to the front, you're gonna read something that doesn't make sense to the story. And in that aspect, all you see is the structure of that sentence. So you're able to say, oh yeah, that's not, that should have an apostrophe there, something like that. And it's a great tool to use. Number 8, refer to your outline. Now, assuming you created an outline and you're not a pantser, before you began the journey with your memoir, you should be making regular revisits to your outline as you're drafting to make sure that you're staying on track. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't go deeper or you can't change your direction. But if you change your direction, you just want to make sure that it still makes sense, that it's still the same journey, it's still the same project, the same story you want to tell. If you change it, just go back to your outline and make the very, one sentence change there as well, so that it stays in sync with your manuscript. And then you're able to go to your outline and follow it and just make sure, because it's very easy to emotionally get over here and go down that rabbit hole and then do this, and you end up with a story about learning the game of golf and no one cares. It you were going for, this was my coming of age story, and then it ends into a golf book. It doesn't. You really need to be careful. It is very easy to twisty turn around. So just keep your references and make sure that you're going back to your outline. And when you're done, you want to make sure that your whole story was logical, engaging, and emotionally charged. All right, so now number 9, we're going to talk about consistency. Now, you're going to check for consistencies, again, like the names, the settings, timelines, things like that. Those will trip you up, because even if you remember everything so precisely, there's the slightest details that a reader will catch that you may not. So just be very careful and reread. And then number 10, hire a professional editor. Now, you don't have to. If you used all the tools, if you have, a good experience with self-editing, and maybe your papers were always getting A's in school or whatever, you may not need to hire a professional editor, but don't hesitate to do it just in case, if you want to, if you don't feel entirely confident, because I will tell you, the readers can tell if something is poorly edited. And even if your story is amazing, if it's poorly edited, unfortunately, they'll think less of it. And I don't want that for you. I want this to be your great story and the legacy that you leave. So just remember, proofreading and polishing is very important. And it is, it's not the absolute final step, but it's getting close to the last step of your journey. So there's no need to start cutting corners now. All right. So if you're ready, it's time to move on to the next section. All right, so here we are. We are going to talk now about the top 10 editing tips for memoir writers. We are getting close, guys. It's almost time to actually get in there and start your editing. So before you do, make sure you make a checklist. That's number 1. Your checklist is going to be everything that you need to do. Obviously, I suggest you bookmark this spot right where you're at and come back often, take a screen snip, do what you need to do to make sure that you have a checklist in front of you so that you know what's going on. You need to be able to have something to refer back to. Don't count on your memory on your memoir. Number 2, eliminate filler words. Words like or just or really. These words don't have value in your memoir. They just don't. They just don't. They don't. See, you could have said the exact same thing. They don't. They just don't. Now, you could say that it adds additional impact, but if you do it often, then it's a problem. So pick your battles there. Number 3, vary your sentence structure. Now, what I mean by that is, sometimes you may want a longer sentence to get a point across, but then let the next sentence be shorter. Kind of make it something that the reader can stay engaged in. If it becomes long sentence after long sentence after long sentence, your reader is going to be like, oh my gosh, this is too much. And they're going to put your book down. So don't do that to them. The shorter paragraphs, the shorter sentences, these things help your reader get through your book faster. Number 4, cut out some adverbs. You don't have to eliminate all of them, but things like quickly and loudly, those things can often be replaced with stronger verbs. Number 5, use an active voice. The active voice instead of passive voice really does make your writing more engaging and easier to read. Number 6, check for repetition. Now, sometimes repetition's good if you're trying to teach someone something and you want to say it again and again so that it sinks in. Now, that's the kind of repetition that's great, but in a memoir, you're not generally doing that. So repetitious words, you really kind of want to get rid of, especially the phrases that become your reader's pet peeve by the time they get done with your book. I felt like, I thought, and if I couldn't help but feel, if you keep saying these things over and over again, your reader is just not going to be happy. So go through, and you can actually do it really easily if you search in your, like any word processor. You could search that word phrase and see how many instances it's there in that same phrase. And if you've got it more than a handful of times, then you may need to go change the phrasing on some of them. You don't have to change them all. You don't have to get rid of them all, but don't be too repetitive. Number 7, read your work aloud. And I know that I sound like a broken record with that, but it is so important because your mind skips, your eyes skip, your ears haven't heard it as often as your mind and your eyes have. So they're more apt to catch something. So let your ears help you. Number 8, use a thesaurus. Now, using a thesaurus is important because if you're using a word repeatedly, maybe instead of he asked, that gets old. So, he quizzed, he questioned, whatever the mood of that sentence is, you can fit that word. It means asked, but it's going to say something different. And by going a little bit stronger and clearer with that other word choice, you're better able to actually draw the picture for your readers. So use a thesaurus. It is a wonderful tool, and it is still one of my favorite things to do. And honestly, you don't even have to have the thesaurus anymore. You just go to the internet and you say other words for, and boom, it'll pull up all the sites for you. So use the internet. It is your best friend. I love the internet. Use strong verbs. Number 9. This is really an effective way to make your writing more engaging and impactful. Number 10, simplify complex sentences. So if you're saying, he ran across the street, then up the alley, then down a back road. That could be a series sentence. It could be one sentence, but it's probably also going to be a long sentence. That could just as easily be 3 sentences, or somehow other rephrased or reworked so that it's easier to read. So keep that in mind. The shorter sentences and the shorter paragraphs really are your friend. Guys, I am excited. I hope that you're gonna do just great through the editing phase. Don't forget, there are editors out there who can help you. You are not alone. And if you're not in our writing group yet, you need to come join us. It'll be down in the description. It is a free writing group. Come in. If you have questions about editing or things like that, we're happy to, offer opinions and just kind of point you in the right direction. You can find editors on platforms, like Fiverr and Upwork. There's a whole bunch, but we have all that actually listed in the reading and the writing group if you're interested, if you want to come in. But I hope that you are ready for this. Don't be afraid. You can do it.